Do you hear what I hear? That's the title of a marvelous show that we'll have at Mississippi State University in the Briscoe Art Gallery until September 15th. And we're very fortunate today to have on the campus, and I have the real privilege of talking with Reinhold Marxhausen, who likes to be called Marx. And we're talking about serendipity, one of the most fascinating words in the language, but I think one that will be very differently illustrated today by all of the different objects that are around us, and more significantly by what Marx has to say about them. His wife has said that being able to communicate about art by making people relax and really enjoy art, Marx has made his significant contribution. And I think that we ought to ask some questions that will illustrate that. One that particularly, I think, intrigues me is a reference that I found in some material that Marx made comments about the ancient church and how significant art was in the sense of stained glass, the significant structures, and how we've now become a culture in which media and so many other forms have usurped that sort of involvement in communication. So I'd just like to say, what is this serendipity that you find in art? How are you going to bring us more into the mind of the medieval man?
Well, serendipity means the possibility of making a happy chance discovery. That's what it means. And we live in a marvelous world with all kinds of things happening all the time, but I think through the educational system we get to learn how the world works, and then we expect that it's going to work that way. Even little children have the idea that, well, my parents or my teachers will tell me how things work and so forth, so they don't have to be alert to discover new things. And I think that's too bad. It's too bad. And then with the media, the way we have it today, we have access to all kinds of things all around the world, which we could experience from sitting in a chair and watching a screen, and we really don't make any new discoveries by ourselves, our discoveries. And I think there's a difference between finding and discovering, or no, not finding and discovering. What were the two words we talked about before? Finding and searching. Finding means that you go out and you have some preconceived ideas what you're looking for, and you just keep looking for that thing and until you find it. Finding is to discover something that you didn't expect. So there's a difference, and there are a lot of people who have this goal in life, and they're going to search and search and search for this thing, and they might die before they find it. But when I get up in the morning, I try to look forward to at least 10 serendipitous moments per day. So all day long, I'm looking for that moment, and that moment, and that moment. And that's really rather interesting if you anticipate a little surprise. And maybe that's not automatic. And I used to do a slideshow. When I first started to teach many years ago, I started to talk about art, and I realized my students were not getting what I was talking about because we were not seeing the same way. So I took my camera and walked around Seward and started taking pictures of the cracks in the sidewalk and the peeling paint and this and that and all this nice little things I was seeing, and brought them to my classrooms and said, "Did you ever see this? Did you ever see that? Did you ever see it?" No, I haven't. And then I realized that we see the world in a very superficial, like we're scanning the world. Like I have morning glory growing over my studio, and just about any day I come there and I see that they're there, but every day I sit under those morning glories for 10 minutes and let them know that I'm watching them. And it's just really a kind of religious experience that you're giving them time, and you can think about where they came from and where they're going, and they're only going to be there for an hour, and then they start dying, and all that nice stuff. And so I guess this is a long answer to a simple question, but I guess what I'm talking about is a very assertive, aggressive exploration of every day, and to see what can happen today.
Well, it's so important because so much, I think, of our academic tendency is toward the extraordinary, that which has to be very rare, unusual, exceptional, phenomenally important, and you're saying that the ordinary is the most
That's exactly
significant.
right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Well, in looking at the ordinary, is there a common ground we should come to, or should each of us, in this creative sense, look for our own satisfactions?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think maybe you have to. I think each one of us has a certain way of looking at the world. I look at lines and shapes and textures, which are the elements of art, and you might come to your world from another viewpoint, another point of view. So maybe we all have a different vocabulary.
Well, I think that the fact that you focus so heavily in this exhibition and in your recent work with sound is an important viewpoint in terms of art, because so traditionally we've thought of art as being strictly a visual medium.
That's right. And I just came about it just by accident, really. And sound art is really only 20 years old. It's just a new phenomenon. Because when you think of sound, you think of musical instruments and notes and a performance and all of that, and that's over here. And if you want to go to an art experience, that's in the gallery over here. And so they were separated. And there were several sculptors about 20 years ago who welded steel wires together, and then when you touched them, they would hit each other and they produced a sound. Bertoia was his name. He was one of the first sound sculptors. His things made a sound. And I ran across my experience it was a serendipitous moment, and I need to tell you that story because it just changed my life. I went to Mills College in Oakland for my graduate work, and it was Saturday. I went to the studio, and there was nothing to do. There was nothing in the room. There was nothing to do. I had no plans. I just sort of went into the room because there was nothing else to do. So I walked in this room. There was a doorknob on the tabletop. Just a doorknob. And I'm a welder. I like to weld things. So I thought, well, I'll weld some wires to the back of this doorknob. So I welded some wires to the back of the doorknob. So I thought, well, I'll maybe hang it up and make a mobile out of it. Maybe it could be like a Halley's Comet or something. Then, and this is a key word, curiosity. Just out of curiosity, I thought, maybe there's a sound in the doorknob. So I looked around. There's nobody around to embarrass me. So I put the doorknob to my ear, and I plucked the wires, and I heard this fantastic sound. So now I wanted to share it with somebody. So I found another human being. I said, listen to that. Whoa! So I found somebody else. Whoa! So not only did I like my discovery, but other people liked it too. So then I made a stereo, got two doorknobs with the wires on, put a band across here. Then I was walking through the campus like this, and people were saying, what's he doing? What's he doing? And the nice thing is that nobody else could hear it. It was a very private sound. So I went to the snack bar, and I'd go like this and hear the sound. Anyway, this is a long story, but Art Linklater wanted to make this into a toy so that every child in the world could have one of these. But there were several things that wouldn't work. One is it was dangerous, the wires were dangerous, and the wires would break off, so they couldn't make it so. This is a long story, but I'll just abbreviate it. But anyway, I started making variations on that. I started making cubes and other kinds of shapes and using wires and listening to the sounds. And then, but the wires are kind of dangerous. You know, they really, you can hurt yourself on these and they break off. And so I was asked to have an exhibit at the Athenaeum Gallery in Hartford, Connecticut. They have a special room there for the blind and the handicapped. And they're very tactile kind of things. So they asked me to have my things there, and I said fine. And I thought these would be kind of dangerous for the blind people. So I had to figure out some way of getting rid of those wires. So I had this doorknob with the wires on. So I thought, well, I'll put the wires inside. So to solve that problem, I discovered a new thing.
Oh, so and that's the marvelous trick.
So now I had a thing that had a sound inside, the same kind of sound. And the first one I made was about that big. So then I thought, how small can I make it? It got smaller and smaller and smaller. I made one the size of a nickel. But I thought, well, make one that fits the hand and fits in a pocket. So I could call it pocket portable art. So then I called it Stardust. Anyway, you can see the evolution from the wires outside being too dangerous and trying to different sizes and shapes. And this is really a marvelous instrument.
Well, I think an important point you make is about the blind being able to respond to this,
Yes.
because we've all heard the generalizations about increased sensitivity and
Yes.
perception,
Yeah.
and yet all of us can identify with the delicacy of this
Right.
sound and the variety of
Right.
it.
So the last year I got a call from Wichita, and they said, we're having a state convention for the blind here in Wichita. We heard that you have these things. Would you come down there and put them on a table and share them with the people? I said, sure. So I spent 2 days in Wichita. See, the blind people can't touch sculpture in museums. They can't look at it. So there is no art for the blind, per se. It was a marvelous experience, seeing eye dogs and people in wheelchairs, and they were wearing these things and playing. And they said things like, how come we haven't had any art before? You know, why now? So it was. So I go just about every year. I go somewhere in Minneapolis and Nebraska and Kansas to the state conventions for the blind. I take my things, and they really, they have, you know, they can feel the vibrations and they can hear the sound, and they just really enjoy it. So I'm in the process now of getting a grant to build a museum in California, you know, for the blind and the handicapped, which will incorporate some of these things in it.
Well, this institution takes great pride in the fact that we have a reputation among the handicapped for serving them so well.
Really?
So I think that this is very appropriate.
Wonderful. Glad
in
to hear
that context. And it's intriguing, too. I'm reminded of so many things that I've read about you as you're talking, but one comment you once made when someone approached you about mass producing these, I think, was that you didn't want to, because for everyone to have one exactly alike would rob the very nature of the entity.
Well, you just look at the past market for fads. I mean, fads that come and go. I have to tell you this. When the first pet rock came out, I thought, aha, finally people are going to carry rocks in their pockets like I always do. And they're finally going to do that, and it's going to be very nice. I was real happy about that whole thing. And what happened? They turned poetry into prose. And then they put little dresses on the rock and little legs. They made them look like animals and put them in cages. And so when you went to a cocktail party, did you hear the latest pet rock story? And so people were telling the pet rock stories, which was not poetry, which was prose. All the time they were telling the stories. The pet rock was in the fireplace mantle back home. And I was so upset that this thing never came about, that people were carrying rocks, that it became stories, that I just vowed that one day I would remedy that. So now you try to tell your friends about the sound in this, you know, and so I have something that you have to experience. You just can't tell the story. The poetry is in doing it, having it. But the reason I didn't want to mass produce them was that it just makes excitement a kind of a common, I don't know, if everyone had one, then it wouldn't be special. You know, if we all were rich, or if we all were poor, if we all wore red, it just wouldn't be exciting. I mean, diversity brings about excitement. And see, I make these one at a time, and you should see the box of letters I get from people who finally get these, and they write me a letter. So not only are they buying these things, but they're writing their responses, and it's just a moving experience to live in a little town in Nebraska and to reach all over the world with a thing that brings magic in the lives of people.
Well, it obviously does, because very ordinary people and very famous people own them. There's a long list of celebrities that we need not quote, but what's interesting too is that this as a form allows the perceiver, or the person holding and listening, to control as well. Because I was intrigued that striking them together, moving them according to your mood, a physical movement, very much controls the kind of sound.
A lot of the healing, I shouldn't maybe say this, but a lot of the healing people are using them for therapy, and all kinds of psychotherapists are using them, and high-tech people have them on their desk because they live in this high-stress society, and so it is really fulfilling a very therapeutic function too.
Well, it's really what we've done always with children, particularly infants. We've created the most pleasant, delightful sounds, and then supposedly we become too sophisticated to enjoy those, but you've given us that means now.
If I took this and threw it out of this on the street outside this building and came back a year later, it would still be there. And no one would pick it up because It looks like something that fell off of a car. It looks like a piece of machinery. It looks like a rock. And I also make it look ugly, so that you don't pick it up because it's shiny or beautiful. It looks rather ugly. So that's intentional. And the intent is to say that the things that we call ugly, especially people, are not necessarily ugly. You know, I made a comment the other day that, what if God is ugly?
Exactly.
I went to a hospital one day and saw all these real old people in the beds. I thought, no one ever looks at these people. I thought, what if God is like that? You know, God's for the humble and the sick and the poor and so forth. And so what we call beautiful is sort of a superficial label. And in my class, my students have to write a list of all the things that are beautiful, all the things that are ugly. And you should see that list. It's really kind of frightening to see what's on that ugly list, like spiders. And spider, to me, is one of the most beautiful animal. When you think of what spiders can do, and that somebody's putting it on an ugly list, it just can't believe it. So anyway, this thing, and the nice thing is that you give it to a stranger, and they'll sort of frown, like, well, what are you doing to me? And they have kind of a frown on their face because it looks rather ugly. But when they hear the first sound, and they start to smile, and it's intentional, I want people to change their mind, just like that, about ugly and beautiful. That's the most important thing about this, that people change their mind about what it looks like and what it really does. The surprise element. It's serendipity, really. It's a serendipitous object.
It is. Well, it's a real discovery, and it's a total experience because, well, I think that everything I've read about you is almost rife with irony, the unexpected, the opposite of what is anticipated. And I think that's part of obviously what you perceive as a learning process, because we so often hear that creativity can't be taught, that one can't be made sensitive if not by nature. And I, for one, don't believe that. I think that people can be guided to discover themselves in many different ways.
This is another instrument. This is a Oriental cooking wok. It's an ordinary thing you can find in a kitchen. So I put a handle on it so that you can. And right about a third of the way up, I discovered a third of the way up, that's the maximum vibration in any cylinder. Have you heard it yet? Yes.
And in fact, it's almost a stereotypical sound. It's the sort of thing that we hear from the gong, and probably for some of the audience,
it does
they
look
don't
like a
remember
gong.
The movies that used to have the gongs in them.
But it's a gong, yeah, it's a gong. And this is like a large stardust, really, and instead of having wires, they have flanges. So I've made maybe 100 different variations of this idea.
One surprise, I think, is that the sounds are so delicate in relation to the forms themselves. We would expect that delicacy only from glass, for example.
In my talk tomorrow, I'm going to talk about where ideas come from, and most great ideas have come about by accident or by mistake. And it's really, the list is really long, and it's just a different kind of thinking. You know, as we go through life, we're so logical, and we do the logical things. Like, I just live one block from the campus, but when I go to the campus, I go about 20 blocks. I go around this way to go to the school. Next morning, I'll go around this way to go to school. So I've maybe gone from my house to the office, 1,000 different ways. And so in the process, I'm learning about my town where I live. You know, I'm making that boring thing a serendipitous trip when you can go a block away from your house, 15 blocks, and use 15 blocks to get there.
Well, there is so much around us, and we say that consistently in the South, that there is so much to be discovered and so much taken for granted. Well, driving as opposed to walking, I think, has contributed to that. We're isolated from the real world that surrounds us.
And I don't know how you can teach curiosity. How, I mean, a lot of the children today have lost their sense of curiosity. How can you teach that? I don't know. But I think it's important.
Well, I think what you're doing could stimulate that sort of curiosity.
So.
I would think that there would be a level of appeal for many different people here, ranging from small children to the elderly, as you mentioned. They would, and immediately I've made connections as we've talked about these and listened to them for the first time.
You might end up going around the rest of the day tapping things, you know, because everything makes a sound. A piece of cardboard makes a sound, and you can go around and maybe the rest of the day discover some sounds on your own.
Well, and of course, this has been a sort of utopian and anti-utopian projection throughout most of modern history, at least. There have been so many treatments of imaginary worlds, both good and bad, in which there was all the opportunity to experience the senses fully. You know, the feelies of 1984 and so forth and so on. But in looking to the sensory, I think you're pointing up something very important too, and that's that the human form is at the base of all of this. It doesn't take some other intermediary for us to gain access to these.
We have to do it, I think the more, you know, the soles in our shoes are getting thicker, and the padding in our chairs are becoming thicker, and the chairs and our cars are becoming more comfortable. And the more comfortable our life becomes, the less sensual we are. Like, I like to wear shoes with thin soles so I can feel the earth, like the Indians wearing moccasins because they can feel the soil. And so we become insulated in our world because we want to be comfortable. Like, if I go to a room and I have a choice of chairs, I will always sit in a hard one, because when I sit in a soft one, pretty soon I start falling asleep and whatever. But I sit in a hard one, you're more alert. So that's my choice. And so, and when I go to the grocery store, I have this bicycle. It doesn't have a special thing in the back at all. And all the groceries that I buy, I put in that little trap in the back of my seat, you know, big boxes. And so the people say, "You mean you're going to bike all the way home with that in the back?" I said, "Sure. I hope I make it." So every day, there's a challenge to see whether I can go from here 9 blocks away with that extra thing in the back. And so I have to be very careful when I drive. And I've never dropped anything. And I have, you know, bottles and jars and fragile things. In other words, I have a theory that if you do easy things the difficult way, then if someday you have to do a difficult thing, you'll be able to do it easier. That's my theory.
I think it's a very sound theory. And I think there's so many things that you've done in your life that fall into an important pattern for imitation for young people, particularly.
Yeah, I think so,
because it's, well, I was reminded somewhat of Eric Hoffer and the way that he looked at the real world and personal experience is absolutely essential to learning, not strictly academic classroom learning.
That's right.
And he as a philosopher, you as an artist have so much common ground there, and it's something that we consistently advocate to university students, that they should gain experience, but often they limit that to the practical application of the academic experience.
Right.
And you're looking at a broader range. I was fascinated to read that you had bought your casket and that you keep it in your studio. And that sometimes you spend time in it. And it makes you aware then as you awake each day that this is another opportunity to live on and do something productive.
I think another thing we're talking about, I raised 4-leaf clovers in my backyard. The first year I did, I raised 390 clovers in a couple little patches. And I think we all have a frame of reference depending upon where we were born, who our parents were. And so if your frame of reference is like this, chances are everything in your house will be long and skinny this way. And nothing like this will ever enter into your life because you block it out. Now, when I look at clover, I don't look at 3. You know, when I look at clover, my frame is 4. So I can just scan a bunch of clover, and if there's a 4 there, I find it because it fits my frame of reference. And so we go through life with this framing, and we accept the things that will fit the frame and reject what don't fit it. And so I think it's important what that frame is, and maybe it can change and as we look at things.
Well, I think what you've brought for us to not just to see, but to hear, will help people to make that change in reference, to begin to look more sensitively at the world around them, and to be accessible to that finding experience.
Yeah, it's a
to
nice
looking
surprise.
down and as well as looking up. I think so often we think of the image of looking up as being positive and
Yes.
looking down as negative.
Right, right.
But it's all around us.
That's right, that's right.
And certainly one of the real delights of your being here will be the opportunities for people to work with you in the creative process. You've asked people who are coming to your workshops to bring everything but their dirty garbage, newspaper, plastic, anything of that sort. So I think it will be a real experience for all of us, and
I'm
we
looking
look forward to it.
too, yes.
Well, I hope that your stay will be pleasant, productive, and maybe in the future we'll see something that's grown directly out of Mississippi and out of the Mississippi experience among your collection.
I hope so too.
I suspect that we will, because you'll find something here, I'm sure.
I did just a little research with an Alzheimer person, and the reason I found significant discoveries was because no one told me anything about Alzheimer's, so I could be free to do whatever I wanted to.
Exactly.
So, okay.
If we can just teach that freedom. We've been talking with Reinhold Marxhausen, whose exuberance and vitality certainly make us all want to discover, as he's described, what is available for us to find in the world. We're very fortunate at Mississippi State to have many fine students in the honors program, and certainly they'll benefit from the presentation that Marx will make to them, and as will many students in the different workshops that he'll conduct. But I think most significantly, we'll all benefit from handling those fine artworks that will bring us that sense of his question, do you hear what I hear?